Hello everyone, this is going to be the 11th video in George Gurdjieff series, and in this video we are particularly going to cover about a gentleman who is very famous as such, and his name is Pythagoras. So we'll be talking here about Pythagoras music of sphere. Let's try to understand what that is, because this is very critical for us to understand. This is what was called as music of the spheres as such. This is the sun, this is Terra, and Terra means the earth, and these are the other planets, also our moon. So he did study this in detail. We'll try to understand what are the advantages of this theory, because Pythagoras was the first person who derived this theory, and he was the person who started working on music octaves overall. Of course, he's been known better for his Pythagoras theorem, which is pertaining to geometry, but music of the spheres is also something which is very relevant and important for us to understand. So let's go step by step and try to understand that, because this is also going to be there, and we will be dividing this video into two different parts. Let's try to understand from the output point of view what we are going to see at the end, which is again very important. Let's look at this picture overall. So this is going to be an extended model. So let's say we know this is the sun, and this are the various planets, plus this is the asteroid belt which we have been talking about between Mars and Jupiter. If you don't remember that, let me just recollect you across that. Okay, we have seen that between Mars and Jupiter there is a huge gap. So this gap is nothing but the asteroid belt. Now, there is also certain different aspects which is there, but let me try to explain you one by one about this overall theory. If you keep the planets in a line, in an alignment as such, and if you see, we get certain ratios which is there. So the ratios have been given at the top. Let's say, for example, this is 1, then probably this comes 2, then we have 4, then we have 8, 16, 32, and this is 64. So these are probably the ratios which have been coming up all together for the planets. You can just probably pause and try to see which are the planets, or maybe something as a gap which has been given. Now, if you try to probably have this together in a certain ratio, what you get is these ratios are going to be almost 9 is to 8. These ratios which are there, those are going to be 9 is to 8. So we don't have to understand this formula as such. But yes, this is how it is, 9 is to 8, and 9 is to 8, if you divide it, probably you get to a ratio which is 1.125. 1.125. Now, if you get all the ratios which is there, let's say, for example, 64, 32, 16, 8, 4, 2, 1. It is there. We get almost 1.125, which is, let's say, 100. And again, the second one is 1.125. The third one is again 1.137, which is just a 1% above the 100% value that we have. This is 1.113. This is 99%, just again 1% deviation. So if you overall look, yes, you will be almost getting 100, 101%, 99%. And they align together in a ratio. So this is again something which is really important for us. We'll again come back to this slide, but let's go to the previous slides that we have been studying till now. So we again come back to this table, which is there. And this was the logarithmic scale. This was the fundamental change that we did overall in our concepts, because all our previous charts, or maybe the previous diagrams which are there, they were been aligned in a different way. But here we got to a scale which is also been called as logarithmic scale, where the units are totally different. For example, the Earth's measurement from the sun is going to be 1 astronomical unit. So this is going to be 1, then from 1 we go to 10, from 10 we go to 100, and this is how the scale would be increased across. This is something for the people who are totally new. I'll request you, if you can go through the previous videos to have a better understanding about the things that we are trying to explain. So yes, the Earth to the sun, the distance is 1 astronomical unit, and if you keep it on the logarithmic scale, it is after 1 going to be 10. After 10, it's going to be 100. And this is how we are going to measure across the things. So this is the first part. If you go and look for a bigger picture as such, so from the sun to the earth, that is one astronomical unit. Then we go from 1 to 10, 10 to 100, 100 to 1000, and so on. So this is how probably the Milky Way can be placed together and seen how it looks like. Now, there is something really critical and important that we need to understand. So these are the planets which are there, and on the planet's outer side, we have something called as termination shock and heliopause. Now, this is something really important for us to understand what that is and what does stand for. So if this is termination shock, to so this is the previous chart. If we see across, yes, here also we see the heliopause and the termination shock. So this is like maybe probably the planets are within this termination shock. Now, termination shock, probably this is something at a higher level. We'll probably see this in go into the series twos of these videos and then try to understand things in detail. So yes, there is something called as termination shock, heliopause, and again something which is really important for us to understand is the ratio, which is 9 is to 8, and this 9 is to 8 ratio comes to 1.125. This is again very important for us to understand. We'll look at this maybe probably in some time. Let's come back to music of the sphere. So this is music of the sphere. This was something derived by Pythagoras. So probably I'll do one thing. I'll just, yeah. So this looks something better for us to understand. Now what he did is probably the this is first of all going to be a geocentric model where the earth is being considered as stationary and all the planets including sun are being considered as moving around the earth. So this is something called as the geocentric model where the earth is considered as stationary as we look from the earth, that okay, we are stationary and everything is revolving around the earth. So we have sun, we have the moon, and the overall planets have been kept over here. So this probably, if I zoom it across, I won't be able to see this more of in detail. So for this, I'll do one thing. I'll probably pick up something from this part. So this is again a chart that we have available. If you click across now, probably you can just go on the website and just type down music of the spheres or Pythagoras, and probably you'll be able to get this detail. And if you click it across on this, so probably you get this. Now, if I zoom across, which I've already done and kept it over here, we have the Earth, we have this sun, that is Sol, and then we have other planets which are there together, and we have also our satellite, that is Luna, which is the moon. Now, if we see this together and probably place them properly, how this proper placement has been done, for that, let's try to our previous book, which is Holy Science. And there we are going to see only about one fundamental thing which is there, that is octaves and the ratios. Because these ratios are again something really important for us to understand. These are going to be the basics. These are not going to change. So these are going to be as it is. These are octaves. The ratio is 1 is to 2. And about this octaves part, W.D. Gann has also talked about in his book, Tunnel Through the Air. We have already described that in our previous videos where he has mentioned. If you can just type across maybe Pythagoras and try to understand about that. Yes, a hint is been given about that in Tunnel Through the Air also. So this is 1 is to 2. Then we have quint, which is 2 is to 3, and we have quart, which is 3 is to 4. Now, just understand this. For people who are new, I'll request you if you can go to the previous videos and maybe get a better understanding, because this is the 11th video. And yes, the music part which comes into picture and the quint and quart are been given over here. So this book is also there on our Telegram channel. You can go through that. So coming back to our part. So we have already seen this picture. This is something called as the geocentric model. what happens in the geocentric model is the Earth is being considered as stationary, and including our satellite and the planets, they revolve around the Earth. This is what is been considered as the geocentric model. Now, because we stay on Earth and we assume that it is stationary, that's why this has been assumed. We do not have to take the literal meaning of all these things together. But yes, these are models which are easier for us to understand. So that's why they are being considered in that way. Now, what happens because of this is we have, let's say, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. From Earth to the skies, which is also been called as heaven, there are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 levels, you can say, or 8 steps from Earth to the sky. Now, how they are? The first one is Earth, then we have Mercury, we have Venus, we have Sun, then we have Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and then the sky. Now, please understand one thing. Till that time, when this theory was being established, we only had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 planets. The rest of the planets were not been discovered. So this is again a drawback, disadvantage about this theory. If you try to look at this theory overall, yep, there are certain ratios which have been formed over here, which are critical and important for us to understand. Let's go to the theory part. Pythagoras, extrapolating this effects, reasoned that because objects produce sound when in motion, planets moving in orbit should also produce a sound. Now, this was the fundamental theory that Pythagoras adopted across. In the geocentric diagram above, there are 8 steps from the Earth to the highest skies. Between the Earth and the Moon, there is one full tone, which is called as tonus. Between the Moon and Mercury, one half tone. So let's try to understand one by one. So this is Earth, and from Earth we have Luna. So this is going to be one tone, or as in the language it is called as tonus. So from Luna to Mercury, that is Moon to Mercury, again we have half tone. And between Venus and the Sun, 1.5 tone. So if we see from Venus to Sun, which is also called as Sol, so we have 1.5 tone, and this is how the calculation goes across. He measured distances based on relative speed. What do you mean by relative speed? That is, faster moving planets were closer to the Earth and slower moving planets farther away. So this, because the speed of these planets, including Luna, which is not a planet technically, but that is a satellite of Earth, we can also call as heavenly bodies together. So these are faster moving planets. These are probably slower moving planets. Now, why the Sun is being kept over here? Let's come back to that part also. These ratios corresponded to tonal musical intervals in the Pythagoras scale. Right? Now, this is something really important for us to understand. Again, the Sun was being placed over here. There is something really important for us to understand why the Sun was being placed over here. Now, previously, when this theory was being adopted, there was certain different things which were there. There were certain disadvantages to this theory also, which we are trying to study, which is really important for us to understand. Now, talking about the ratios which are there, we need to also understand about one important thing. You can go on this website, which is Hyperphysics, and probably try to just type across Pythagoras, and you'll be able to get the details. Now, this important part that we are trying to see is the pentatonic musical scale can be devised with the use of only the octave. First and fourth. What do you mean by first and fourth? Probably for that, we need to again go back to the book of Holy Science, and this is quint and quart. So quint is nothing but 5, which is fifth tone, and quart is something called as the fourth tone. So this we need to understand. Who are new, probably I'll request you if we can just go through the previous videos to understand things. Fifth and fourth, it produces three intervals, right? So a pentatonic musical scale can be devised with the use of only the octave, fifth and fourth. Now, what is fifth and fourth that we try to understand is already been given here. That is the octave, the quint and the chord, which is called as the fifth and the fourth. It produces three intervals with ratio 9:8 and two larger intervals. Now, what is these two larger intervals? If you see over here on the tones, which is there like C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So from F, that is C to D, we have first ratio, which is 9:8. Again, if you see, you again get a ratio between F and G, which is 9:8. From G to A, again, we get a ratio, which is 9:8. But over here, if you try to find out between D and E, that is 9:8, and between E to F, if you find out the ratio, that is something different. Similarly, the ratio between B and C is something different. Now, why is this different? That is the first part, and how you are able to understand that. That is the second part. If a 9:8 interval is carved out of the larger ones, a smaller interval is left, B and C and E and F. So B and C and E and F, these two ratios have been left out. This creates a Pythagorean diatonic scale. In the semitone thus created is taken from the whole tone or chromatic semitone of different size in leftover. This leads to some of the difficulties of Pythagorean temperament and other temperaments. Such difficulties ultimately lead to the development of equal temperament. Now, as I told you, yes, 9:8, this is where the 9:8 is derived from. This is where the 9:8 is derived from. And if you try to check probably what we have checked in this video, we are getting the ratios which are 9:8. Now, because of these ratios which are 9:8, this theorem of music of the spheres was being developed together by Pythagoras. Now, rest of the planets, as I told you, those were not there. So this is something called as the extended model as such specifically. This is going to be the extended model. Probably we see this later on, but we need to understand, first of all, the theory which was being put across by Pythagoras as such, and on the basis of the information which was available at that time, probably he came with something across this part. So these were the planets which have been placed, and accordingly, he tried to have an interpretation of all these things together, and he was able to develop something across on these parts. Of course, we understand that because there were only 5 planets at that time, there were certain drawbacks which were there with what was been there in music of the spheres, because there was certain knowledge which was not available during that time, which we probably came to know about that later on. So what are the disadvantages? Let's say, first of all, we'll try to understand. First and most important thing is there are not all the planets which are there over here. There are not all the planets which are there over here. So that is the first drawback that we understand for this part. Second thing is, what we know is this is going to be more of a geocentric model. A geocentric model is where Earth is being considered as stationary and center of the solar system, and other planets, including our satellite, that is Moon, as well as the Sun, they keep on rotating around our Earth. This has been what is been considered in a geocentric model. So this is again a disadvantage because that is not what is there. We consider actually the heliocentric model. Heliocentric model is where our existing solar system is there. So we considered the sun to be stationary and all the planets to be revolving around the sun, which is practically, yes, that is how it has been there. One more thing which we adopt over here is, now actually it was being assumed that the sun is not the source of energy as such. So it was something which was actually reflecting the light from something called as the center or maybe the heart of the universe, as this actually gave us light. Now we were not able to see this fire because of something called as the counter earth, and because of this counter earth we were not able to see this ball of fire, and sun was only as a medium through which the light was been reflected from this ball of fire. So these are certain theories which are there altogether. Because of this theory was not been put across. But yes, if we look at the basic fundamental part which is there of music of the spheres, yes, this is something which we really adopted to, and we need to, as per the basis of the drawbacks which are there, we need to see certain things, aspects which are there, and probably continue with this model. So yes, definitely we'll be taking this ahead and try to understand more about this part. There are certain other things also that we need to understand. So let's say, for example, here again we see the ratios, which is again in the form of 9:8. We have this for 1/2, 2/3, 3/4, which this ratios which we are able to see over here. This is 1/2, 2/3, 3/4. So this ratios, again, this becomes fundamentally very important, and we see the same ratios 1/2, 2/3, 3/4 over here. So again, this is something really important for us to understand. This is also we can know this as epoch tooth. So of course there are other ratios also which are associated over here, but yes, probably we'll take this at a later part. This is probably, again, you will be able to get this picture on Google and try to understand more about this. So certainly we will definitely come back to probably this part and again try to understand the ratios which are there, who derived this, who worked on this part, and what are the further clues that we are able to get across through this, and again about the termination shock. So we'll meet in the next video and try to understand more about this part.